The morning light came through the kitchen window, the way it always had, slanting across the oak table Linda and I had picked out at that estate sale in '89. I was holding my coffee mug, the blue one with the chip on the handle that she'd refused to throw away. "Character," she'd said, running her thumb over the rough edge. That chip felt sharper now, 3 years after her funeral. I'd been standing at the sink, rinsing my breakfast plate, when I heard the key in the lock. Not a knock, not even the courtesy of ringing the bell. Just the mechanical slide of metal entering the deadbolt I'd installed myself 20 years ago, back when my hands were steadier and my son was someone I thought I knew. The front door opened, footsteps multiple sets crossed the hardwood floor of the entryway. I dried my hands on the dish towel, the same faded blue one Linda had embroidered with yellow flowers during her last good summer. My heart was doing something irregular the way it had been since the surgery, but this wasn't medical. This was the body knowing something the mind hadn't caught up to yet. Ethan appeared first, my son, 42 years old now, wearing that gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. His hair was shorter than I remembered, touched with silver at the temples, that made him look distinguished in a way that felt borrowed from someone else's life. Behind him came Madison, his wife, in a cream-colored coat that whispered money with every movement. And behind them, this was the part that made my grip tighten on the towel, came Gerald and Patricia Monroe. Madison's parents looking around my kitchen like real estate agents assessing a property. "Dad," Ethan said. Not a greeting, just an acknowledgement. The way you'd say table or chair. I set down the towel with deliberate care. "Didn't know you were coming by. We have keys." Madison's voice had that practiced sweetness like artificial honey. "We thought it was time for a conversation." The four of them arranged themselves in my kitchen, Madison leaning against the counter where Linda used to roll out pie dough, Gerald pulling out a chair that scraped against the floor in a way that made me wince, Patricia standing with her purse clutched to her chest like a shield. Only Ethan remained standing in the doorway, backlit by the morning sun, his face in shadow. I poured myself more coffee. Didn't offer them any. Some instincts run deeper than hospitality. What kind of conversation requires 4 people and no phone call? I kept my voice level. 68 years of living had taught me that volume wasn't where power lived. It lived in the spaces between words, in the things you chose not to say. Ethan glanced at Gerald, who nodded. Some signal I wasn't meant to understand. "Dad, we've been talking," Ethan began, and I noticed he didn't look at me when he said it. His eyes were on the refrigerator, where a photo of him at 10 years old still hung under a magnet shaped like a cardinal, the one Linda had bought at the zoo on his birthday. "About your situation here. This house. It's getting to be too much for you." So... I took a sip of coffee. Bitter? I'd forgotten the sugar. Madison moved then, that calculated grace she'd perfected. "Richard, we're concerned. A man your age living alone in a 3-bedroom house. All these stairs, the yard maintenance, the memories." She said that last word like it was something toxic that needed to be disposed of. Patricia chimed in, her voice carrying that particular brand of forced compassion. "We've been looking at some lovely assisted living facilities, gardens, activities, people your own age. You wouldn't be so isolated." I watched them, these 4 people arranged in my kitchen, like pieces on a board game I hadn't agreed to play. The morning light caught on Madison's diamond earrings, the ones I'd seen in the photos from their anniversary trip to Cabo. I'd helped pay for that trip, actually. Ethan had called it a temporary cash flow issue. Assisted living. I repeated slowly, tasting the words like I was considering them. I wasn't. I was buying time the way you do when you're building something and need to let the foundation set. "It would be for the best," Gerald said, his first contribution to the conversation. His voice had that executive timbre, the kind developed in boardrooms and golf courses. Madison's sister had to make this decision for her father-in-law last year. It was difficult, but necessary. I set my mug down on the counter next to the spot where Linda used to keep her recipe box. The sound it made was definitive, like a period at the end of a sentence. "And what happens to this house?" I asked, though I already knew. The way they were standing, the way their eyes kept drifting to the crown molding I'd installed by hand, to the built-in shelving Linda had designed, they'd already divided up the rooms in their minds. Ethan finally stepped fully into the kitchen, and I saw his face clearly for the first time. There was something there that hadn't been there before, or maybe it had always been there, and I just refused to see it. a hardness like concrete that had finished setting. "We'll take care of it," he said. "In fact, we've been thinking Madison's parents need a place. Their lease is up next month, and with Dad's retirement—" He gestured to Gerald, who nodded solemnly. "It makes sense. Family helping family." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. I could feel it pressing against my chest, could hear the tick of the kitchen clock Linda had bought at a yard sale, the one with the rooster that crowed on the hour, except the mechanism had broken years ago, and now it just ticked, marking time without celebration. I looked at each of them in turn, Madison with her perfect posture and her eyes that calculated everything like a cost-benefit analysis. Gerald already mentally rearranging the furniture, Patricia clutching her purse tighter, as if afraid I might lunge for it. And Ethan, my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike in this very driveway, who'd helped me build the deck out back, who'd sat at this table doing homework while Linda made dinner and hummed along to the radio. "Family helping family," I said finally. "That's what you call this." "We're trying to do what's best for everyone," Madison said, and her hand moved to touch Ethan's arm, a gesture of unity that felt rehearsed. I picked up my coffee mug again, held it between both hands. The ceramic was warm against my palms, solid, real, something to anchor to. "When your mother was dying," I said, and Madison flinched at the word. "She always had been squeamish about unpleasant realities. She made me promise something. She made me promise I'd stay in this house as long as I could stand on my own 2 feet. Said she wanted to know her gardens would be tended, her kitchen would smell like coffee in the mornings, that the swing out back would keep moving even after she couldn't push it anymore." Ethan shifted his weight. "Dad, Mom wouldn't want you to—" "She made me promise," I continued, my voice still level, still calm, "that I wouldn't let anyone take this from me, not age, not grief, and sure as hell not." I paused, looked directly at my son. Not people who measure love in square footage. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly. Or maybe they all just seemed to take up more space with their designer clothes and their calculated concern and their plans for my life that had nothing to do with me. "So, here's what's going to happen," I said, setting the mug down with finality. "You're all going to leave now, go back to your apartments and your hotels and your lease negotiations, and you're going to remember that this house, every nail, every board, every coat of paint is mine. Built with my hands, paid for with my work, filled with my memories of a woman who was worth more than all of you combined." Gerald's face reddened. Patricia made a small sound like a balloon losing air. Madison's jaw tightened, and I could see her mentally recalculating, looking for another angle of attack. But it was Ethan who spoke, and his voice had gone cold in a way I'd never heard before. "It's ours now," he said simply. "Whether you accept it or not, we're family. We have rights. And you're going to need us sooner than you think." He pulled something from his pocket, a folder crisp and official looking. "We've already consulted with an attorney about power of attorney, for when you're no longer able to make these decisions yourself." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that was just beginning to burn. I didn't respond, didn't argue. I just looked at him, this stranger wearing my son's face, and I understood something fundamental had shifted. The foundation had cracked not from age or weather, but from intention. They left eventually, filing out with wounded dignity and veiled threats about being reasonable and not making this harder than it has to be. I stood at the window and watched their expensive cars pull out of my driveway, leaving tire marks on the gravel I'd laid down myself. When the sound of their engines faded, I turned back to my kitchen. The light had shifted slightly, no longer cutting across the table, but pooling on the floor in golden puddles. I walked to the cabinet above the refrigerator, the one Linda could never reach without the step stool, and pulled down the metal box where we'd kept our important papers. Inside were the deeds, the titles, the documentation of a life built deliberately and with purpose. I spread them across the kitchen table, reading through them with the kind of attention I'd once given to building plans and blueprints. My son had made a miscalculation. He'd assumed that age had made me weak, that grief had made me pliable, that loneliness would make me desperate for any connection, even one built on manipulation and greed. He was wrong. I sat down in my chair. Not Linda's, that one stayed empty, still a placeholder for memory, and I began to make a list. Not of grievances or accusations, but of facts, numbers, names, the kind of concrete details that build cases and change outcomes. At the top of the page, I wrote a single sentence: "Blueprints don't argue, they get built." The clock ticked its broken rhythm. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs. And somewhere in the distance, I could almost hear Linda's voice, that dry humor she'd perfected over 40 years of marriage. "I told you to change the locks after he moved out." I almost smiled. Almost. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. Marcus Sheffield, attorney, friend, the man who'd helped Linda and me set up our will, our trust, all the careful architecture of a life planned to last. He answered on the third ring. "Marcus." I said, my voice steady as the foundation I'd poured for this house 3 decades ago. "I need your help. It's time to build something new." Outside, the October wind picked up, sending leaves across the yard in patterns that looked almost intentional. The swing moved gently on its chains, pushed by invisible hands. And in my kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of a life lived and loved and now threatened, I began the work of protecting what was mine. Not with arguments, not with pleading, but with the same patient, deliberate precision I'd used to build everything else that mattered. They thought they'd already won. They had no idea the construction had just begun. If you want to see part 2, comment next to let us know. The house breathed differently after they left. I'd never noticed it before, the way silence has its own texture, its own weight. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after hanging up with Marcus, my hand still resting on the phone, feeling the plastic grow warm under my palm. The afternoon light had that particular October quality, thin and golden, making everything look like it was already a memory. Linda's recipe box sat where it always had, on the counter next to the stove. I found myself standing in front of it without remembering the decision to move. My fingers traced the edge of the worn wooden lid, felt the grooves where she'd carved our initials during one of those early years, when we were still learning each other's rhythms. Inside her handwriting, filled index cards, neat, precise, each ingredient measured exactly: pot roast, apple pie, Christmas cookies. The paper had yellowed at the edges, spotted with flour and vanilla and the passage of time. I pulled out the card for her Thursday meatloaf, the one Ethan had loved so much he'd requested every birthday until he turned 16 and discovered girls and basketball and dreams that didn't include small-town dinners. "He used to help you with this," I said aloud to the empty kitchen. "Remember, he'd crack the eggs, got shell in the bowl every time." The house didn't answer, but I heard her anyway, that laugh she'd get when Ethan would do something clumsy but earnest, that particular blend of exasperation and love that only mothers seem to master. I put the card back, closed the box. The afternoon stretched ahead of me like an empty road. I walked through the house, really looked at it for the first time in months, maybe years. When you live somewhere long enough, you stop seeing it. It becomes backdrop, becomes assumption. But now, with the threat of losing it hanging in the air like humidity before a storm, every detail came into sharp focus. The living room, where Linda had arranged furniture by the seasons, closer to the fireplace in winter, opened up to catch the breeze in summer. The dining room with the table I'd built from oak, I'd milled myself each plank, chosen for its grain, its character. The built-in china cabinet where Linda's collection of blue willow plates stood in careful rows, untouched since the funeral. Upstairs, I paused at the threshold of our bedroom. Her things were still there, perfume bottles on the dresser, her reading glasses on the nightstand, the romance novel she'd been halfway through when the cancer finally took her. I'd meant to pack them away, give them to charity, let someone else find use in them. But every time I tried, my hands would freeze, unable to complete the erasure. The guest room, Ethan's old room, had been converted years ago to Linda's sewing space. Her machine still sat by the window, catching the north light she said was best for seeing true colors. Half-finished quilts draped over the chair, their patterns telling stories she'd never get to complete. I stood in the doorway and let myself remember Ethan at 3, running down these halls in footy pajamas. Ethan at 10, head bent over homework at the kitchen table. Ethan at 17, slamming this very door after an argument I couldn't even remember the cause of now. Ethan, at 25, standing in our living room in his wedding tux, nervous and proud, asking if his tie was straight. Where had that boy gone? When had he been replaced by the man in the gray suit, the one who looked at this house and saw dollar signs instead of the thousands of small moments that made a home? The doorbell rang, pulling me from the past. I checked my watch. Marcus had said he'd come by after his last appointment. True to his word, there he stood on my porch, briefcase in hand, looking every bit the country lawyer he'd been for 40 years. "Frank," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. I brought the files. We settled in at the dining room table, spreading papers across the oak surface. Marcus had that particular efficiency of men who'd spent decades dealing with life's complications. No wasted movement, no unnecessary words. The house is titled in your name only, he said, running his finger down a document. Linda's name came off after the estate settled. The will is clear everything goes to Ethan, but only after your death. While you're living, you have absolute control. They mention power of attorney, I said. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. They'd need you to sign that. They can't force it. Not unless... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Not unless they can prove incompetency through the courts. And can they... He looked at me over his glasses. Can you balance a checkbook, remember what day it is, make your own decisions about medical care? Yes to all three. Then no, they can't. But, Frank... He leaned forward, his voice dropping. If they're already talking about it, they're planning something. Power of attorney is step one. Next comes guardianship proceedings, mental competency hearings. I've seen families tear each other apart over less. I absorbed this feeling, the weight of it settle in my chest. What are my options? Marcus pulled out a fresh legal pad, uncapped his pen. We can establish an irrevocable trust, transfer the house into it, with you as lifetime beneficiary. We can update your will to include protective language. We can even... He paused. We can deed the property to a charity or organization with a life estate for you. You'd live here until death, but they couldn't touch it. The veterans' home, I said suddenly. The one Linda volunteered at. They've been wanting to expand, create a retreat space. Marcus made a note. That could work. Gives you control, keeps the house from becoming a family battleground, and honors Linda's charitable work. It's creative. We worked through the afternoon, Marcus asking questions me, providing answers, both of us building a legal framework as carefully as I'd once built actual frames for houses. By the time the October sun was slanting low through the windows, we had a plan. I'll need a few days to draft everything, Marcus said, gathering papers back into his briefcase. And Frank, don't sign anything they bring you. Don't let them pressure you into temporary arrangements. The devil's in the details with this kind of thing. After he left, I made myself dinner, scrambled eggs and toast, the kind of bachelor meal Linda would have scolded me for. I ate standing at the counter, looking out the window at the backyard, where the swings still moved gently in the evening breeze. My phone rang. Ethan's number. I let it go to voicemail, listened to it afterward. Dad, I hope you're thinking about what we discussed. We're only trying to help. Madison's parents are going to need an answer soon about the house. I'll call tomorrow. Maybe we can talk more reasonably then. The condescension in his voice, that particular tone that suggested I was the one being difficult, the one being unreasonable, lit something in my chest that wasn't quite anger. It was colder than that, more deliberate. I deleted the message. The evening settled in with that particular quiet of autumn crickets slowing down, birds gone to roost the world, taking a breath before the long sleep of winter. I sat in my chair, the one I'd positioned years ago, so I could see both the television and Linda's chair, and I let myself think about what came next. They wanted this house, wanted it enough to scheme, to manipulate, to treat me like an obstacle rather than their father. The question wasn't whether I'd fight. That decision had been made the moment Ethan said, "It's ours now," with that cold certainty in his voice. The question was how. I thought about the houses I'd built over my career, each one starting with a foundation. A frame, careful planning before the first nail was driven. This would be no different. I had the blueprints now, courtesy of Marcus. I had the materials, the legal documents, the clear title, the right to dispose of my property as I saw fit. What I needed was the execution, the careful, patient work of building something that would stand. My eyes fell on the photograph, on the mantle, Linda and me, on our 40th anniversary, standing in front of this very house. She was smiling that smile that had first made me stumble over my words when I was 22, and she was the prettiest girl at the county fair. Her hand was in mine, our fingers intertwined in that unconscious way of people who'd touched each other thousands of times. What would you do? I asked her image. But I already knew. Linda had never been one to back down from what was right, even when right was hard. She'd faced down cancer with more grace than I could muster for a common cold. She'd turned our house into a home through sheer force of will and love. She'd made me promise to stay here to keep her gardens growing, to let her presence remain in every corner and crevice. I wasn't about to break that promise for anyone, not even our son. The night deepened. I turned off the lights one by one, moved through the house. In darkness I'd navigated for 30 years. But before I went upstairs, I stopped at the kitchen table, pulled out a notebook Linda had used for grocery lists, and began to write. Not a plan exactly, more like a blueprint. Step 1. Secure the foundation, complete the legal transfers with Marcus. Step 2. Reinforce the frame change. Locks establish boundaries, document everything. Step 3. Build the walls. Make it clear, irrevocably clear, that this house would never be theirs to take. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the pages were filled with the careful notations of a man who'd built things for a living and knew the importance of details. Then I closed the notebook, placed it in the metal box with the deeds and titles, and climbed the stairs to bed. I slept in fits, waking to shadows that looked like Linda, to sounds that might have been Ethan, as a boy running down the hallway. The house was full of ghosts, but they were my ghosts, my memories, my reasons for staying. Morning came with that crystalline clarity that October sometimes offers air so clear it hurt to breathe, sky so blue it looked painted on. I made coffee, carried it out to the porch, and sat on the swing Linda had insisted we install. The chains creaked their familiar song. The neighborhood was waking up, dogs barking, cars, starting the ordinary symphony of ordinary lives. But my life wasn't ordinary anymore. It had become a battleground, my home, a prize in a war I hadn't declared, but would finish. I thought about calling Ethan, trying one more time to reach the boy who'd built model airplanes at this very kitchen table, who'd learned to drive in my old truck, who'd cried in my arms when his college girlfriend broke his heart. But that boy was gone. In his place was a man who looked at his father's home and saw opportunity, who measured love in terms of real estate value, who was willing to dispossess an old man for convenience and profit. The swing moved, pushed by wind or memory or Linda's invisible hand. I won't let them have it, I said aloud to her, to myself, to the morning air. Whatever it takes. And in that moment, sitting on the porch of the house I'd built with my own hands, drinking coffee from Linda's favorite mug, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day they told me she was gone. Absolute clarity of purpose. The ghosts in this house were staying, and so was I. The next 3 days moved with the peculiar slowness of waiting. I went through my routines: coffee at sunrise, scrambled eggs that tasted like cardboard, the crossword puzzle that Linda used to help me finish. But underneath the ordinary, I was watching, listening, preparing. Ethan called twice more. I didn't answer. Let him talk to the machine, let his voice echo in an empty room. Each message was a variation on the same theme: concern, wrapped in impatience, love, disguised as duty. Dad, we need to discuss this like adults. You're being stubborn about something that's for your own good. Delete. Madison's parents have given notice on their apartment. We're counting on you to do the right thing here. Delete. The third message was different, shorter, sharper. Fine, we'll come by Saturday with our attorney. This can be easy or hard, your choice. I saved that one. Marcus had said to document everything. Saturday dawned gray and heavy, the kind of October morning that promises rain but can't quite commit. I'd been up since 5, unable to sleep, moving through the house like a sentry checking perimeters. Everything was in order. The new locks Marcus had recommended were being installed Monday. The legal documents were in his office safe. The trust paperwork was drafted, waiting only for my signature. But there was something else I needed to do first. I drove to the cemetery where Linda rested, the route so familiar I could have done it blind. The headstone was simple, the way she'd wanted it. Linda Margaret Dalton, 1955-2022. She made everything beautiful. The plot beside hers waited empty, marked only with my name and birth year. The death date a blank space waiting to be filled. I sat on the stone bench I'd installed the month after the funeral, when I'd needed somewhere to be close to her that wasn't home. They're coming today, I told her. Ethan and Madison, their lawyer, going to try to force my hand. A crow called from the oak tree overhead. The cemetery was quiet except for the wind moving through the headstones like whispered conversations. Remember when he was 12? I continued, my voice rough. That summer he decided he wanted to build a treehouse, spent weeks drawing plans, measuring lumber. I helped him, but I let him think he was doing it himself. Took us all July and half of August. I could see it clearly. Ethan's face flushed with effort and pride, hammer in hand, that crooked smile when the last nail went in. We'd slept out there that first night, him and me looking up through the branches at stars, talking about nothing and everything, the way fathers and sons do, when they're not trying to be anything but present. When did he stop seeing me as someone to build with and start seeing me as something to build around? The question hung in the air unanswered and unanswerable. The wind picked up scattering leaves across the grass. I stood touched Linda's name carved in granite and drove home to face whatever was coming. They arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, punctual, prepared, presenting a united front. 3 cars this time, Ethan's BMW, Madison's Mercedes, and a silver Lexus I didn't recognize. I watched from the living room window as they organized themselves like an advancing army. The lawyer emerged first from the Lexus, a woman mid-40s carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Power suit heels that clicked on my driveway hair, pulled back so tight it looked painful. She conferred briefly with Ethan and Madison before they approached the door. I didn't wait for them to knock. Opened it, wide stood in the frame, my house, my threshold, my terms. Ethan, I nodded. Madison. I looked at the lawyer. And you are Catherine Walsh, representing the Dalton family interests. She extended her hand. I didn't take it. The Dalton family, I repeated. That would be me. I'm the Dalton family. Her smile was professional ice. Mr. Dalton, may we come in? We have some matters to discuss that would be better handled privately. I stepped back, let them enter. They filed into my living room like a delegation entering enemy territory. Gerald and Patricia were already inside. They'd come early, let themselves in with the key I'd forgotten Ethan still had. The ambush was complete. Make yourselves at home, I said with deliberate irony. Oh, wait. You already have. Madison's eyes flashed, but Gerald cleared his throat, playing peacemaker. Frank, let's all sit down, talk this through rationally. Rationality? I said, remaining standing while they settled onto Linda's furniture. Is that what we're calling this? Catherine Walsh took control, opening her briefcase with practiced efficiency. Mr. Dalton, we're here because your family is concerned about your welfare. Living alone at your age in a house this size presents certain risks. We've prepared some documents that would ensure your care while also providing security for your son's family. She laid papers on my coffee table, the one I'd built from reclaimed barnwood, where Linda used to arrange her magazines and neat fans. Power of attorney, she continued, naming Ethan as your legal representative. It's a standard precaution for someone in your situation. My situation, I let the words hang. And what situation is that? A widower in his late 60s living alone, showing signs of, she consulted her notes, confusion about current arrangements, difficulty accepting necessary changes. The room got very quiet. Even Patricia stopped fidgeting with her purse. Confusion, I said softly. You think I'm confused? Dad? Ethan leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. We're worried. You're not thinking clearly. This house is too much for you. We're offering you a solution that benefits everyone. Everyone. I looked at each of them in turn. Let me make sure I understand. You want me to sign over legal control of my decisions to you, move into a facility, hand over my home to Madison's parents. And this benefits everyone. How exactly? It benefits you by ensuring proper care, Catherine Walsh said. It benefits your family by preserving assets and preventing unfortunate situations that can arise when elderly individuals refuse assistance. The word elderly hit like a slap. I was 68, not ancient. I still mowed my own lawn, managed my own finances, drove myself to doctor's appointments that confirmed I was healthier than men half my age. I see, I said. And if I refuse to sign these papers? The lawyer's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Then we'd be forced to pursue other options, competency evaluations, guardianship proceedings. It's a difficult process, hard on everyone involved. We'd prefer to avoid that. The threat was clear, dressed up in legal language and concern. Sign or be declared incompetent. Comply or be dragged through court. I walked to the mantel, picked up the photograph of Linda and me, ran my thumb across the frame the way she used to touch that chipped coffee mug. You want to know about confusion, I said, still looking at the photo. I'm confused about when my son stopped being my son and became a stranger who'd threatened his own father. I'm confused about when family became a transaction instead of a bond. I'm confused about how we got here to this moment in this room having this conversation. I turned to face them. But I'm not confused about one thing. This is my house, built with my hands, paid for with my labor, filled with memories of a woman who was worth more than all your schemes combined. And you're not taking it from me. Dad, Ethan started. I'm not finished. My voice was level, but it carried the weight of every year, every disappointment, every moment of clarity I'd gained in the past 72 hours. You want to know what's really confused thinking you could walk in here with your lawyer and your papers and your manufactured concern, and I'd just roll over, thinking that age equals weakness, that grief equals vulnerability. I moved to stand behind my chair, Linda's chair visible over my shoulder. I know exactly what you're doing. I've known men like you my whole life. Construction sites are full of them. Men who see an opening and push, who mistake patience for weakness, who think they're the smartest ones in the room. Catherine Walsh stood gathering her papers. Mr. Dalton, you're making this very difficult. We're trying to help you. No, I said. You're trying to help yourselves. There's a difference. Ethan's face had gone red, that tell he'd had since childhood, when he was caught in something he couldn't talk his way out of. So that's it. You're just going to be stubborn. Force us to do this the hard way. The hard way, I repeated. You mean the legal way, the way where you have to prove I'm incompetent? Good luck with that. I've got doctor's reports, financial records, and a mind that's clearer than it's been in years. Madison stood now too, her composure cracking. This is ridiculous. We're family. We're trying to take care of you, and you're acting like we're the enemy. Family, I said, looking directly at my son, doesn't threaten, family doesn't manipulate, family doesn't show up with lawyers and ultimatums. Whatever this is, it stopped being about family the moment you said, it's ours now. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Gerald, who'd been trying to maintain his executive calm, looked uncomfortable. Patricia had tears in her eyes, whether from frustration or shame, I couldn't tell. Catherine Walsh snapped her briefcase shut. Mr. Dalton, you'll be hearing from our office. This conversation is on record. Good, I said. Document it all. Document that I'm of sound mind, living in my own home, refusing to be bullied by my own son. They left in a flurry of expensive coats and wounded dignity. Ethan paused at the door, looking back at me with something I couldn't quite read. Anger, regret. The face of a stranger either way. This isn't over, he said quietly. No, I agreed. It's not. But it's not going the way you think it is. The door closed. Through the window, I watched them huddle on the driveway, Catherine Walsh talking urgently, gesturing. Then they dispersed to their cars, engines starting in sequence like dominoes falling. I stood in my living room, surrounded by the life Linda and I had built, and I felt something crack open in my chest. Not breaking, transforming. The grief and loneliness that had defined the last 3 years was being joined by something harder, something more durable. I called Marcus. They just left, I said when he answered. Brought a lawyer, threatened competency proceedings. Did you sign anything? No. Good. Come by my office Monday morning. We're accelerating the timeline. After I hung up, I walked through the house one more time. In the kitchen, I made the pot roast from Linda's recipe card, the one Ethan used to love. I didn't know why sentiment, maybe, or the need to reclaim something that had been good before, it all went wrong. The house filled with the smell of cooking meat, onions, carrots, comfort food for a situation that offered no comfort. I ate alone at the table, Linda's chair empty, Ethan's childhood place settings packed away years ago. The pot roast tasted like every Sunday dinner we'd ever had, like normalcy, like a life that used to make sense. I saved the leftovers, old habits die hard, and cleaned up with the same methodical care I'd always used. Then I sat at the table with my notebook adding to the blueprint I'd started. Step 4. Let them make their move. Let them file their papers, pursue their competency evaluation. Every action they took would be documented, would build my case that this was about greed, not concern. Step 5. Complete the trust transfer. Put the house beyond their reach legally irrevocably. Step 6. Change the locks, install the security system Marcus recommended. Physical security to match the legal protection. The phone rang. Ethan again. I let it ring, listened to his voice on the machine. Dad, I'm sorry it went that way. We're just worried about you. Can we talk Just you and me, no lawyers, no Madison. Please. The please nearly broke me. Nearly made me pick up Try to Find My Son somewhere under the stranger's voice. But I'd learned something today. Learned it in the hard, cold clarity of threat and counter-threat. Words were cheap. Actions told the truth. And Ethan's actions spoke louder than any apology could. I deleted the message, turned off the lights, and climbed the stairs to bed. Through the window, I could see the streetlight catching on the swing in the backyard, making it glow like a ghost. Somewhere in the house, a board creaked, the one in front of Linda's sewing room, the one that always announced your approach. But no one was there. Just memory, just the house settling, just the weight of all those years pressing down. I lay in the darkness and thought about Monday, about Marcus's office, about signing papers that would ensure this house. Linda's house. Our house would never belong to people who saw it as nothing more than square footage and monetary value. The silence between father and son had become a chasm. I was okay with that. Some silences were earned. Sunday morning arrived with frost on the grass, the first real bite of winter showing its teeth. I'd been awake since 4, unable to sleep, mind churning through possibilities like a cement mixer that wouldn't stop turning. By the time weak sunlight filtered through the bedroom curtains, I'd made 3 pots of coffee and filled another 10 pages in my notebook. The house felt different in the early morning, quiet, not empty exactly, but expectant, waiting. The way a job site feels before the crew arrives when it's just you and the raw materials and the plan in your head. I spread the documents Marcus had given me across the dining room table. Power of attorney, the real one, the one I'd give to Marcus, not Ethan. Advanced healthcare directive, the trust paperwork dense with legal language that boiled down to something simple this house would never be Ethan's to take. My phone sat silent on the table. I'd turned off the ringer after Ethan's 6th call yesterday evening, each message a variation on the same theme apology, mixed with pressure, concern, wrapped around entitlement. I'd listened to none of them. Some conversations were over before they began. Instead, I focused on what I could control. The blueprint was taking shape, but it needed details, the kind of specifics that turn plans into reality. I pulled out the yellow pages. Yes, I still use them, kept them in the drawer where Linda used to store her knitting patterns, and started making calls. First to Tom's Security Systems, the local outfit that had been in business since before cell phones made everything complicated. Tom, Frank Dalton, I need cameras, motion sensors, the works. Frank, everything okay? Just being cautious. Can you come by tomorrow? Make it Tuesday. Monday's booked solid. Tuesday works. Next call, the locksmith. Then the lawyer Marcus recommended for estate planning, backup redundancy, making sure no angle was left exposed. By 9 o'clock, I had appointment scheduled, plans in motion. The blueprint was becoming 3-dimensional, acquiring the depth and structure of something that could actually stand. I made myself breakfast pancakes, Linda's recipe, the one that required you to separate the eggs and fold in the whites last for extra fluffiness. Seemed like a waste for one person, but the ritual of it mattered. The careful measuring, the precise folding, the attention to detail that separated good from merely adequate. The pancakes were perfect. They tasted like cardboard anyway. I was washing the dishes when I heard it. The sound of a car door closing, followed by footsteps on the porch. Not the heavy tread of multiple people, just one person moving with familiar hesitation. Through the kitchen window, I saw him, Ethan, alone, wearing jeans and an old jacket I recognized from 10 years ago. No Madison, no lawyer, no reinforcements. Just my son, looking more like the boy I remembered than the stranger from yesterday. I dried my hands, took a breath, and opened the door before he could knock. Dad? He looked terrible, eyes shadowed, face unshaven, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Can we talk? Please. I stepped back, let him in. Old habits, old hopes, old wounds that wanted to believe this could be different. We stood in the hallway, neither of us moving toward the living room, neither willing to sit down and make this comfortable. Madison doesn't know I'm here, he said. Neither do her parents. Does your lawyer? He flinched. That's not Dad. That wasn't supposed to go like that yesterday. Things got out of hand. Out of hand. I repeated his words back to him, a technique I'd learned from Linda when dealing with difficult conversations. Let them hear themselves. I just wanted to talk to you about options, about making things easier. Madison's parents really do need a place, and you really are here alone, and it seemed like what? like you could kill two birds with one stone, solve their housing problem, and ease your conscience about your old man in one convenient transaction. His jaw tightened. That's not fair. Fair. I almost laughed. You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you about Fair Ethan. Fair was your mother working double shifts at the diner so we could afford your orthodontics. Fair was me taking a second mortgage to pay for your college when your scholarship didn't cover everything. Fair was us co-signing your first car loan, your apartment lease, loaning you money for Madison's engagement ring that you still haven't paid back. I didn't come here to, no, let me finish. My voice stayed level, but each word carried weight. Fair was your mother planning this house, this garden, making me promise I'd stay here, keep it alive, keep her memory alive in every room and corner. And fair is me honoring that promise no matter what you or Madison or any lawyer says. He sagged against the wall, and for a moment I saw him at 16 again, caught sneaking back in after curfew, trying to decide whether confession or defiance would serve him better. I'm drowning, Dad. The words came out barely above a whisper. The business isn't what I thought it would be. Madison's used to a certain lifestyle. Her parents lost most of their retirement in that investment scheme. And I thought maybe if we could all just use me as a solution to your problems. Help each other. Family helping family like you always taught me. I felt something twist in my chest. This was the manipulation at its finest, using my own words, my own values against me. I taught you about family, I said carefully. I taught you about helping each other, about sacrifice, about putting others first. But I also taught you about honesty, about standing on your own feet, about not taking what isn't yours to take. The house would eventually be mine anyway. We're just talking about timing. And there it was, the truth beneath all the concern and family values talk. He'd already spent his inheritance in his mind, already counted on my death to solve his problems. Eventually, I said slowly, is not now. And what you're talking about isn't timing. It's theft dressed up as family obligation. His head snapped up. Theft, I'm your son. Are you? The question hung between us. Because my son wouldn't show up with lawyers and threats. My son wouldn't try to have his father declared incompetent. My son wouldn't look at the house his mother loved and see nothing but equity. Mom would want us to be practical. She'd want, don't. The single word cut sharp. Don't tell me what your mother would want. I had 40 years with her. I know exactly what she'd want. She'd want you to have a backbone, to solve your own problems, to be the man she raised, not whoever this is standing in my hallway making excuses. The silence stretched. Outside, a car passed. A dog barked. The ordinary sounds of Sunday morning in a neighborhood where families were still, families where sons didn't plot against fathers. What do you want from me? Ethan asked finally. Nothing. The word was simple, final. I don't want anything from you. Not anymore. So that's it. You're just going to cut me off. I'm going to protect what's mine, what your mother and I built, what you apparently see as nothing more than a commodity to be traded. He pushed off from the wall, stood straight. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by something harder. You're making a mistake. Madison's father has connections. Their lawyer is one of the best. You can't win this. Win? I shook my head. This isn't about winning, Ethan. This is about not losing who I am, what I promised your mother, the dignity of living in my own home on my own terms. So we're enemies now. We're strangers. There's a difference. He moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the knob. I remember building that treehouse with you. You know what you told me when we finished. I did remember, but I didn't speak. You said, always plan 3 steps ahead. Know what you're building before you start. I learned that lesson, Dad. Better than you think. The threat was clear, even dressed in memory. Then you'll understand, I said, that I've been building things a lot longer than you have, and I always finish what I start. He left without another word. I watched through the window as he sat in his car for a long moment, hands on the wheel, head down. Then he started the engine and drove away, leaving only exhaust in the cold morning air. I returned to the dining room to my papers and plans. But first, I pulled out my phone and played the voicemails I hadn't listened to from the night before. The first 5 were variations on themes I expected apology, pressure, concern. But the 6th, the last one, made me stop. Dad, it's me. It's late, I know, but I need to tell you something. That lawyer, Catherine Walsh. She's not just any lawyer. She specializes in elder exploitation cases for the families. She knows every trick, every loophole, every way to prove someone isn't competent to make their own decisions. Madison's father recommended her, said she's never lost a case. A pause, the sound of him breathing, maybe drinking. I heard ice clink in a glass. I'm telling you this because I don't know anymore. I don't know if I'm trying to help you or help myself, or if there's even a difference. But you should know what you're up against, what I'm willing to do. Another pause. Mom would be ashamed of me. I know that. I see her picture on that mantle, and I know exactly what she'd say. But she's not here, is she? She's not here, and I'm drowning, and you're sitting in that house like a monument to the past. And I don't know how to be your son anymore. The message ended. I played it twice more, listening for the boy, underneath the confession, the son beneath the stranger. Maybe he was still there, buried under debt and pressure and bad choices. Maybe not. It didn't matter. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. You can only decide how to cross the river without them. I picked up my pen, returned to my notebook, added another line to my blueprint. Step 7. Document everything. Every call, every threat, every attempt at manipulation. Build a case not just for protecting my house, but for protecting myself. The morning dissolved into afternoon. I made calls, sent emails, set things in motion that couldn't be stopped. Marcus confirmed our Monday meeting. Tom's security promised Tuesday morning for the cameras. The estate lawyer confirmed she could see me Wednesday. I was building something, not a house this time, but a fortress. Legal walls documented proof, unassailable evidence that I was exactly what I claimed to be, a sound-minded man, protecting what was his. At some point, I made lunch a sandwich. I didn't taste coffee that had gone cold before I remembered to drink it. The house settled around me, creaking its familiar songs, keeping its secrets. I thought about Linda, about her gardens that still needed tending, her recipes, still waiting to be made, her presence that filled every corner despite 3 years of absence. This house was more than property. It was promise, memory, love, made tangible in wood and brick and careful planning. Ethan wanted to reduce it to square footage and market value. He'd forgotten what I'd tried to teach him. The most important things can't be measured in money. The sun was setting, painting the western windows gold and crimson when I finally put down my pen. The blueprint was complete, not just on paper, but in my mind, in my resolve, in the bone-deep certainty that I would do whatever it took. I stood at the kitchen sink, looking out at the backyard, where the swing moved gently in the evening breeze. Somewhere in the past, a boy was pushing that swing, laughing, calling for his mother to watch him go higher. Somewhere in that same past, a man and woman were holding hands on the porch, planning futures they thought were guaranteed. But the past was gone. Only the present remained, and the future I could build with careful planning and stubborn resolve. I raised my coffee mug, the chipped blue one, Linda's favorite, toward the window, toward the swing, toward the memory of everything that had been good. Blueprints don't argue, I said aloud, repeating the line I'd written days ago. They get built. Tomorrow I'd start building in earnest. Tonight I'd rest in my house, surrounded by my memories, protected by my plans. The silence between father and son had become permanent. I was learning to live in it. Monday morning, I dressed in the suit I'd worn to Linda's funeral, dark gray pressed sharp, despite 3 years in the closet. Some occasions demanded formality, and declaring war on your own son apparently qualified. Marcus's office was downtown, in one of those old brick buildings that had survived urban renewal by being too stubborn to tear down. 3 flights of stairs, no elevator. My heart complained on the second landing, reminded me it wasn't what it used to be. But I made it breathing hard but standing straight when I pushed through the frosted glass door. Frank, Marcus stood from behind his desk, decades of paperwork stacked in neat piles like archaeological layers of legal history. Coffee. Black 2 sugars. He poured from a pot that looked older than both of us, handed me a mug that said, "World's okayest lawyer," a gift from his daughter, he'd told me once, with that particular mix of pride and resignation only family can inspire. I did some research over the weekend, he said, settling back into his chair. Catherine Walsh, she's as good as her reputation suggests. Expensive, aggressive, successful. She's gotten guardianship for families in cases where the evidence was a lot thinner than what your son has. What does he have? Marcus ticked off points on his fingers. You're a widower living alone. You're 68. You have a heart condition. You've been isolated since Linda passed. And, he paused, He'll argue your refusal to accept reasonable help shows impaired judgment. That's it, that's enough. In the wrong hands, presented to the right judge with the right medical testimony, it could be. I felt the coffee turn sour in my stomach. So what do? Marcus pulled out a thick folder. We build a better case. Medical records showing cognitive function. I've already called Dr. Morrison. She'll do a full evaluation. Financial records proving you're managing money competently. Character witnesses who can testify to your independence and capability. And this? He slid papers across the desk. The trust documents refined and finalized over the weekend. The Clearview Veterans Home is on board, I asked. Director called me personally Sunday afternoon. They're honored. They'll accept the property and trust you retain life estate. They get full ownership upon your death. They've even agreed to let you serve on their board if you want show's continued engagement community involvement. I scanned the documents, legal language swirling into something that looked like protection, like purpose. There's one catch, Marcus said carefully. Once you sign this, it's irrevocable. You can't change your mind. The house will never go to Ethan, never be sold by anyone, never be touched by creditors or claimants or clever lawyers. That's not a catch, I said. That's the point. I need to be sure you understand what you're giving up. The right to sell if you need money for medical care. The ability to leave it to grandchildren if Ethan ever... Stop! I set down the coffee mug with deliberate care. There won't be grandchildren, at least none I'll know, and I don't need the money. I need this house to mean something more than square footage. I need Linda's dream to continue. I need to know that what we built together will help others build their lives back together. Marcus studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Then, let's make it official. We spent the next 2 hours going through every clause, every contingency, every detail that would transform my home from personal property into protected legacy. Marcus explained implications I hadn't considered: tax benefits, liability, protections, the way it would shield the house from any claims Ethan might make now or after my death. He could contest this, Marcus warned. Claim undue influence, diminished capacity, that you weren't in your right mind when you signed. Let him try. We'll have medical evaluations, witness testimony, documentation that this was planned, deliberate, rational. We'll also have his threatening voicemail, his attempt to force power of attorney, his lawyer's intimidation tactics, all documented, all time-stamped. By the time we finished, my hand was cramping from signatures, but the deed was done. The house belonged to the trust belonged to the veteran's home, and I belonged to myself, protected, purposeful, free. One more thing, Marcus said as I gathered my copies of the documents. Change your locks, today, and Frank, be careful. Desperate people do desperate things. Catherine Walsh isn't just a lawyer, she's a strategist. She'll be looking for any mistake, any moment of weakness she can exploit. I left his office with the weight of legal protection in my briefcase and the lightness of purpose in my step. The heart complaint on the stairs going down, but less than before. As if knowing I'd secured what mattered gave me strength I'd forgotten I had. The hardware store was my next stop. New deadbolts, window locks, the kind of security that didn't require electricity or codes or systems that could fail. Physical barriers, solid and simple. Upgrading security, Frank Tom Wilson asked, ringing up my purchases. Just being thorough. Heard there was some family trouble. If you need anything, folks in this town, remember what you and Linda did for the community center renovation. You're not alone in this. The words caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the legal battle, the documents and strategies I'd forgotten. I lived in a place where people still noticed, still cared. I appreciate that, Tom. Back home, I spent the afternoon installing new locks. The physical work felt good: screwdriver biting into wood, the precise alignment of strike plates, the satisfying click of deadbolts sliding home. Each lock was another layer of protection, another statement of ownership and autonomy. I was finishing the back door when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw a silver sedan, not one I recognized. A woman emerged mid-50s carrying a clipboard and wearing the determined expression of someone on a mission. I met her at the door, new lock gleaming between us. Mr. Dalton, I'm Jennifer Morrison from Adult Protective Services. I received a call expressing concern about your welfare and living conditions. So, it had begun. Ethan and Catherine Walsh weren't waiting. They were attacking on multiple fronts. Come in, I said calmly. I've been expecting something like this. She walked through the house, making notes. I watched her observe the clean kitchen, the organized living room, the well-maintained furniture. She asked questions about meals, medications, daily routines, social contacts. The caller suggested you might be living in unsafe conditions, she said carefully. That you were isolated, possibly not caring for yourself properly. And what do you see? She looked around at the spotless counters, the organized pantry, the refrigerator stocked with fresh food. At me, showered and dressed, clear-eyed and coherent. I see a man managing quite well, she admitted. But I have to follow protocol. Would you mind if I ask a few more questions? We sat at the dining room table, the one I'd built on the chairs Linda had refinished. She asked about my medical care, my finances, my mental state. I answered each question clearly, provided documentation when requested, doctor's appointment cards, bank statements, the calendar where I tracked medications and activities. Mr. Dalton, I'll be filing a report that indicates no cause for concern. The house is well maintained, you appear to be in good health and sound mind, and you're clearly capable of independent living. Can I ask who made the complaint? She hesitated. It was anonymous, but mentioned they were a concerned family member. Anonymous? I repeated. How convenient. After she left, I called Marcus. They sent Adult Protective Services. The worker found no issues, but it's on record now, a complaint and investigation. Good, Marcus said, surprising me. Let them document that you passed every assessment, that their concerns were unfounded. It strengthens our case that this is harassment, not genuine worry. That evening, I made Linda's pot roast again. Seemed I was drawn to comfort food in times of stress. The smell filled the house, made it feel lived in, loved, normal. I set the table for one, but found myself looking at the empty chair where Linda used to sit, where Ethan had sat as a boy. The doorbell rang just as I was sitting down to eat. Through the window, I could see Ethan's BMW in the driveway. I almost didn't answer, almost let him stand there ringing and knocking while I ate my dinner in peace. But curiosity won. I wanted to see what his next move would be. He stood on the porch alone, and this time he looked less like a man on a mission and more like someone who'd lost his way. Dad, I need to talk to you. Please. I'm having dinner. I know about the APS visit. Catherine suggested it, said it was standard procedure, but He ran his hand through his hair. I didn't think they'd actually come. I didn't think it through. You didn't think a lot of things through. Can I come in 5 minutes? That's all I'm asking. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. He followed me to the dining room, stood awkwardly while I sat back down to my dinner. Sit or stand, your choice, but I'm eating. He pulled out a chair, not his old spot, but the one nearest the door, emergency exit positioning. I talked to Madison about everything, about the house, about her parents, about the pressure I've been under. And she said I'm being an idiot, that I'm destroying my relationship with you for people who aren't even my family. I cut a piece of pot roast, chewed slowly. It was good. Linda's recipe never failed, even when everything else did. What do you want, Ethan? I want to fix this. I want to stop the competency proceedings. Tell Catherine Walsh we're not moving forward. In exchange for what? Nothing? No exchange? Just, I don't want this. I don't want to be the person who does this to his father. I studied him across the table, saw the boy who used to steal bites of pot roast before dinner was ready, who'd help clear the table without being asked, who'd hug his mother goodnight every single night until he was too cool for such displays. You already are that person, I said quietly. The question is whether you stay that person. I know I've messed up. I know I've said things, done things that can't be taken back. But Dad, his voice cracked slightly. I don't want to lose you, not over this, not over a house. It's not about a house. It never was. Then what is it about? I set down my fork, looked him directly in the eyes. It's about trust. It's about respect. It's about whether you see me as a father or as an obstacle. It's about whether this family means something more than property and convenience. I know all of that, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The apology hung in the air between us. I wanted to believe it wanted to reach across the table and bridge the gap that had opened between us. But 3 years of building codes and construction had taught me something essential. Foundation cracks don't heal themselves. They require repair reinforcement proof that the structure can hold weight again. I've made some changes, I said carefully. Legal changes. The house is no longer part of my estate. His face went pale. What did you do? I protected it, put it in an irrevocable trust with the veterans' home. I have lifetime rights to live here, but it'll never be sold, never be used for anyone's convenience, never be part of any settlement or inheritance. You gave away my inheritance. And there it was, the slip, the truth beneath the apology. I gave away my property. There's a difference. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. So that's it. You've made sure I get nothing. After everything, Mom and you, after all of it, I get nothing. You get what you deserve, a chance to build your own life without counting on mine to end. A lesson in standing on your own feet. A reminder that some things can't be taken, only given. I can't believe you did this. Believe it. It's done, filed, recorded, irreversible. The only question now is what happens next between us. He moved toward the door, stopped, turned back. His face was a mixture of emotions. I couldn't untangle. Anger hurt. Maybe relief that the fight was over, even if he'd lost. What has happened next? That's up to you. You can keep fighting, keep trying to prove I'm incompetent, keep listening to Catherine Walsh and Madison's parents. Or you can accept that some battles aren't worth winning. And if I walk away, if I just let it go, then maybe someday we can find a way back to being father and son. Not today, probably not this year, but someday. He nodded slowly, processing. Madison's parents are going to be furious. They've already started packing. Not my problem. Catherine Walsh will want to pursue the competency case anyway. She'll say you were unduly influenced, not thinking clearly. Let her try. I've got medical evaluations, witness statements, documentation of her intimidation tactics. She'll lose, and it'll cost you money you apparently don't have. He looked around the dining room one last time at the pot, roast cooling on the table, at the empty chair where his mother used to sit at me. His father, the man who just chosen a principle over family peace. I really am sorry, Dad. I know, but sorry doesn't rebuild what's been broken. Only time and trust do that. He left quietly, no slamming doors or angry words. Just the sound of his car starting, backing out, driving away into the October evening. I sat alone with my dinner, now cold, but still edible. I mechanically tasting nothing but the bittersweet flavor of necessary choices. When I finished, I washed the dishes, put away the leftovers, cleaned the kitchen until it gleamed. Then I sat in my chair, the one I'd positioned to see both Linda's empty seat and the window where I could watch the swing move in the backyard. The phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, Catherine Walsh's office. I let it ring. Some calls didn't deserve answers. The house settled around me, familiar and safe, protected now by law and locks and the knowledge that I'd done what needed to be done. Outside, the swing moved in the darkness, pushed by wind or memory, or Linda's invisible hand reminding me that some things endured, some things lasted, some things were worth fighting for. Tomorrow, Tom would install the security cameras. Wednesday, the estate lawyer would add another layer of protection. And somewhere in the future, maybe Ethan would understand what I'd tried to teach him tonight, that the most valuable inheritance isn't property or money, but the dignity of standing on your own ground, protecting what matters, and knowing when to let go of what doesn't. I turned off the lights, climbed the stairs to bed, and slept better than I had in weeks. The legal hammer had fallen, the foundation was secure, and I was still standing in my house on my terms, free. Tuesday morning came with the kind of November chill that seeps into old bones and settled there. I was up before dawn, watching frost patterns form on the kitchen windows, delicate crystalline structures that reminded me of blueprints of the way small things could create larger patterns if you knew how to look. Tom from the security company arrived at 8 sharp, his van, loaded with cameras and motion sensors and all the modern technology I'd avoided for years. But this wasn't about convenience anymore. This was about documentation, evidence, proof. Going to wire the whole place? He asked, hauling equipment to the porch. Anywhere someone could enter without permission, front, back, sides. I want to know if a mouse crosses the threshold. He didn't ask why. Small-town courtesy meant you didn't pry into a man's business, especially when that man looked like he was preparing for siege. I watched him work, learning the system, how the cameras fed to my phone, how the motion sensors would alert me, how everything recorded to a cloud storage system that couldn't be erased or tampered with. This is professional-grade stuff, Frank, Tom said, calibrating the last camera. The kind of thing you see in businesses, not homes. Sometimes homes need business-grade protection. He showed me how to access the feeds, how to download footage, how to share with authorities if needed. By noon, my house had electronic eyes watching every approach, every entrance, every potential threat. I was testing the system when I heard the alert chime movement detected at the front door. I pulled up the feed on my phone and saw them, Madison and her mother, Patricia, standing on my porch with shopping bags and determined expressions. I opened the door before they could knock. "Ladies." Madison's smile was bright and false as costume jewelry. "Richard, we brought lunch. Thought we could have a nice visit, just the three of us." Patricia held up the bags. "Chinese food, that place you used to like on Main Street." They were employing different tactics now: soft approach, family warmth, the feminine touch that had worked on me when Linda was alive. And these visits meant shared recipes and grandchild hopes. But Linda was gone, and I saw these women clearly now. "I'm not hungry." "Oh, come now," Patricia said, already moving past me into the house. "Everyone needs to eat, and we need to talk about this misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding." Madison followed her mother in both of them, carrying bags toward my kitchen like they owned the place. I stayed by the door, hand on the knob, escape route calculated. They spread food across my kitchen table, containers of lo mein and fried rice and sweet and sour pork. The smell filled the room, reminded me of Sunday dinners when Ethan was young and Linda would order takeout as a treat. "Sit, please," Madison said, pulling out a chair. "Let's talk like family." "We're not family, not anymore." Patricia's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "Richard, don't be dramatic. We're still Ethan's family, which makes us yours. Family doesn't threaten. Family doesn't send adult protective services. Family doesn't try to steal houses." "Steal?" Madison's voice went sharp. "We're trying to help you. You're confused, Richard. You need to see that." "I see perfectly well. I see two women in my kitchen uninvited, trying to manipulate me into giving up what's mine." Patricia set down her fork with deliberate care. "We brought legal documents, just to review. Nothing binding, just options to consider." Of course they did. The food was just the delivery system for the real purpose. Madison pulled papers from her designer purse, power of attorney forms, guardianship papers, documents that would hand control of my life. To them, to Ethan, to people who measured my worth in property value. "Just look at them," she said. "See how reasonable they are, how they protect you." I walked to the table, picked up the papers, and tore them in half. The sound was satisfying, clean, definitive, final. "Get out." Patricia stood so fast, her chair tipped backward. "How dare you? We're trying to help you, you stubborn old man." "Help yourselves, you mean. Help yourselves to my house, my life, my choices." Madison's mask slipped, completely revealing the calculation beneath. "You're not thinking clearly. The trust you signed that can be contested. Undue influence, diminished capacity. Marcus Sheffield took advantage of a grieving, confused old man. Marcus protected a competent adult from vultures disguised as family. We'll see what the court says," Patricia snapped, gathering the torn papers. "We'll see how competent you look when Catherine Walsh is done with you. Let her try. I've got medical evaluations, witness statements, and now I've got video footage of you two trying to force legal documents on me in my own kitchen." Madison's eyes darted around, spotted the new cameras. Her face went red. "You're recording us. Every word, every attempt at manipulation, every threat disguised as concern." They left in a fury of expensive perfume and wounded pride, leaving the Chinese food cooling on my table. I sealed the containers, put them in the refrigerator, waste not want, not even when the delivery came with poison. I downloaded the video footage, sent it to Marcus with a brief note, "More evidence." His response came within minutes. "Perfect. Keep documenting. They're digging their own grave." The afternoon passed quietly. I ate leftover pot. Roast worked on the crossword puzzle, tried to pretend my hands weren't shaking slightly from adrenaline and anger. At 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Ethan alone, carrying flowers, white roses, Linda's favorites. "I'm not here to fight," he said when I opened the door. "I want to talk, really talk." I stepped aside, let him in. The cameras recorded everything. He set the flowers on the coffee table, sat on the edge of the sofa, like a man ready to run. Madison told me what happened, her mother too. They're not taking this well. Not my concern. They want to push forward with the competency case. Catherine Walsh says you're clearly not thinking straight, making irrational decisions. Protecting what's mine is irrational. Dad, He rubbed his face with both hands. I'm tired. I'm so tired of all of this. The fighting, the lawyers, the pressure. Then stop. I can't. They won't let me. Madison's father has connections money invested in this. Catherine Walsh is on retainer. The wheels are already in motion. So stop them. You're a grown man, Ethan. Act like it. He looked up at me, and for a moment I saw real anguish in his eyes. If I back out now, Madison will leave me. Her parents will sue me for the money they've already spent. I'll lose everything. So you'd rather lose me? The question hung between us. I never wanted to lose you, he said quietly. I don't know what I wanted anymore. I sat in my chair, the one I'd positioned for a clear view of everything that mattered. Let me tell you what's going to happen, I said. Catherine Walsh will file her motion. There will be hearings, evaluations, testimony. She'll paint me as a confused old man, manipulated by my lawyer, making irrational decisions. Dad. And she'll lose, because I'm not confused. I'm not irrational. I'm a man who knows exactly what he's doing and why. The house is protected. My mind is sound, and every attempt to prove otherwise just strengthens my case. They'll destroy you in court, make you look like what? Like a widower who loves his wife's memory enough to protect it, like a father disappointed by his son, like a man standing his ground. I leaned forward. Let them try. The truth is on my side. There's no truth anymore, Dad. Just who tells the better story. Then I'll tell mine, and mine has 40 years of marriage, 30 years of community service, and 3 years of documented competency backing it up. What does theirs have? Greed and manufactured concern. He stood pace to the window. I can't stop this. Even if I wanted to, it's gone too far. You can always stop. You choose not to. He turned back, and his face was the face of a stranger again. Then we'll see you in court. I'll be there, documented, evaluated, and ready to prove that the only incompetence here is in thinking I'd surrender without a fight. He left without the flowers, left them wilting on my coffee table, like hope that had died before it could bloom. I sat in the gathering darkness, didn't turn on lights, just watched through the windows as November evening crept across the lawn. The swing moved in the wind, Linda's ghost pushing it gently, reminding me why I was fighting. The phone rang. Marcus. I heard from Catherine Walsh's office. They're filing tomorrow. Competency hearings scheduled for 2 weeks out. I'm ready. Frank, they're going to make this ugly. They'll question everything, your decisions, your relationship with Ethan, your mental state. They'll twist your grief, your isolation, your age into evidence of incompetence. Let them? I've got 40 years of building houses that still stand. They'll need more than twisted words to bring me down. There's something else. Marcus hesitated. They're subpoenaing Dr. Morrison, trying to get your medical records, find something they can use. Let them look. My heart's weak, but my mind's sharp. The records will prove it. After we hung up, I walked through my house, turning on lights room by room. Each switch was an act of defiance, each bulb a declaration that I was here, alive, competent, in control. In the kitchen, I cleaned up the remnants of lunch wash containers that would be returned, because even in war, some courtesies remained. The cameras watched silently, recording my mundane competence, a man washing dishes, wiping counters, putting things in order. The house smelled of Chinese food and white roses and the particular scent of home that you can't define but always recognize. I stood at the sink, hands in warm, soapy water, and I thought about Linda, about the life we'd built in this kitchen. They think I'm losing it, I said aloud to her, to myself, to the empty room. Think age and grief have made me weak. The swing creaked outside, answering in its way. But I'm not weak. I'm not confused. I'm just a man protecting what matters. I dried my hands on the dish towel, the one Linda embroidered, the one that had survived 3 years and countless washings, because some things were meant to endure. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, court dates, legal battles, testimony that would dissect my life and decisions. But tonight I was here in my kitchen, in my house, in my life, protected by law and locks and the unshakable certainty that some things were worth fighting for. The cameras watched, the house settled, and somewhere in the darkness Linda's memory whispered what I already knew. Stand your ground, keep your promises, protect what's yours. I turned off the kitchen light, climbed the stairs to bed, and slept the sleep of the righteous, or at least the sleep of the prepared. The confrontation had come to my kitchen one last time. Next time, it would be in a courtroom, and I would be ready. The competency hearing was set for a Thursday morning in mid-November. The The courthouse was one of those old stone buildings that had seen generations of families tear themselves apart over money and property, and the particular kind of hatred that only loved ones can inspire. I arrived early dressed in the same suit I'd worn to Linda's funeral, to Marcus's office, to every important moment in the past 3 years. Marcus met me on the steps, briefcase in hand, looking like a country lawyer ready for battle. "Remember," he said as we climbed the stairs, "stay calm, answer only what's asked, don't let them provoke you." I've lived 68 years without losing my temper in public, not about to start now. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more intimate, like having family business aired in someone's living room rather than a grand theater. Catherine Walsh was already there, crisp and confident in a navy suit that probably cost more than my truck. Ethan sat behind her, looking everywhere but at me. Madison and her parents flanked him like bodyguards. The judge entered, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too many families destroy themselves to have illusions about human nature. "This is a petition for emergency guardianship." She began reading from papers in front of her. "The petitioners claim Mr. Frank Dalton is no longer capable of managing his own affairs and requires court-appointed guardianship for his protection." "Mr. Dalton, do you understand these proceedings?" "Yes, Your Honor. I understand my son thinks I'm incompetent because I won't give him my house." A flash of something amusement recognition crossed her face. "We'll hear evidence from both sides. Ms. Walsh, you may proceed." Catherine Walsh stood, and I had to admire her performance. She painted me as a tragic figure, grieving widower, isolated, making irrational decisions, refusing help from loving family members, concerned for his welfare. "Mr. Dalton has recently transferred his primary asset, the family home, to a charitable organization," she said, making it sound like dementia rather than deliberate planning. "This was done secretly without consulting his only son, the natural heir to the property." This kind of impulsive decision-making, coupled with his increasing isolation and refusal of assistance, indicates someone whose judgment is significantly impaired. She called Ethan to the stand first. He took the oath with a shaking hand, couldn't meet my eyes as he testified. Talked about how I'd changed since Linda died, how I was withdrawn, how I'd made irrational decisions, like installing security cameras and changing locks. "Why would a man living alone in a quiet neighborhood suddenly need security cameras?" Catherine Walsh asked, as if preparing for siege was evidence of paranoia rather than prudence. "I don't know," Ethan said quietly. He wouldn't explain, just said he needed to protect himself. "From what?" "He wouldn't say. That's what worries us. He seems to think someone's threatening him." Marcus objected. "Speculation and mischaracterization." But the seed was planted. Madison testified next, all wounded concern and manufactured tears. Talked about how I'd verbally assaulted her mother, torn up documents they'd helpfully prepared, accused them of terrible things. "He seemed paranoid," she said, dabbing at dry eyes. "Convinced we were trying to steal from him when we only wanted to help." Then came their expert witness, Dr. Robert Chen, a psychiatrist who'd never met me but had reviewed the evidence and determined I showed classic signs of paranoid ideation and impaired decision-making consistent with early-stage dementia or depression-induced cognitive decline. I watched this parade of half-truths and outright lies, felt the weight of their performance, their carefully constructed narrative of a confused old man making irrational decisions. Then it was our turn. Marcus called Dr. Morrison first. She'd been my doctor for 20 years, knew me before and after Linda's death. "Mr. Dalton's cognitive function is excellent," she testified. "I conducted a full evaluation last week. Memory tests, executive function assessments, psychological screening. He scored above average for his age group in every category." "But surely grief can affect judgment," Catherine Walsh asked on cross-examination. "Grief can affect mood, sleep, appetite. It doesn't affect the ability to make reasoned decisions about one's property or future." Marcus called 3 more witnesses, Tom, from the hardware store, who testified about my clear, rational planning for home security. The director of the veterans' home, who spoke about my thoughtful, deliberate decision to create a legacy for Linda, and Pastor Williams from the church Linda and I had attended for 30 years. "Frank Dalton is one of the most clear-headed men I know," the pastor said. His decision to donate his home to veterans wasn't impulsive. It was consistent with everything he and Linda believed in. They'd discussed it years ago, wanted to create something lasting. Then Marcus called me. The walk to the witness stand felt longer than it was. Every eye in the courtroom on me, judging, weighing, deciding if I was competent or confused. I took the oath, settled into the chair, and looked directly at the judge. Marcus started with easy questions. My daily routine, my finances, my medical care. I answered each clearly, concisely, demonstrating the competence they wanted to deny. Then he got to the heart of it. Mr. Dalton, why did you transfer your home to the veterans' home? My wife Linda and I discussed it years ago. She volunteered there, believed in their mission. After she passed, I wanted to honor that. Create something that would help others while ensuring I could stay in our home for the rest of my life. Was this decision impulsive? No, I consulted with my attorney, reviewed all options, made a deliberate choice based on my values and my wife's wishes. Why not leave it to your son? This was the moment. I looked at Ethan, saw him shrink in his seat. My son made it clear he wanted the house for his in-laws' benefit, not mine. He tried to force me to sign over. Power of attorney threatened competency proceedings. If I didn't comply, even sent adult protective services to my home based on false claims. I realized then that leaving him my home would dishonor everything Linda and I built together. Catherine Walsh's cross-examination was aggressive, designed to provoke. Isn't it true you've become increasingly paranoid, Mr. Dalton? No, I've become increasingly aware of threats to my autonomy. You installed security cameras because you felt threatened. I installed security cameras because I was threatened by my son and his lawyer, who told me they'd take my house one way or another. You tore up legal documents offered by family members trying to help you. I refused to sign papers that would give my son control over my life and property. That's not paranoia, that's self-preservation. You're claiming your own son is trying to exploit you? I'm not claiming anything. I'm stating facts supported by voicemails, videos, and witness testimony. She tried for an hour to shake me, to make me angry, to prove I was the paranoid, irrational old man she'd described. But I'd spent 40 years dealing with inspectors and difficult clients and people who thought they could intimidate me. I'd learned patience, precision, and the power of letting other people lose their composure while you kept yours. When it was over, the judge took a brief recess to consider. 20 minutes that felt like hours. Marcus and I sat in the hallway, not speaking, just waiting. When we were called back, the judge's face was unreadable. I've reviewed the evidence, heard the testimony, and considered the arguments from both sides. She began. This court finds that Mr. Frank Dalton is fully competent to manage his own affairs. The petition for guardianship is denied. Relief flooded through me, but she wasn't finished. Furthermore, I'm troubled by what appears to be an attempt to use this court's guardianship process to circumvent Mr. Dalton's clear, rational decision regarding his property. The evidence shows a pattern of coercion and intimidation, not of incompetence requiring intervention. She looked directly at Ethan. Adult children have a right to concern about aging parents. They do not have a right to control, to threaten, or to use legal processes as weapons when they don't get their way. This petition is not only denied, it is denied with prejudice. No further competency proceedings will be entertained without significant new evidence of actual impairment. The gavel fell. The battle was over. I stood, shook Marcus's hand, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Ethan called my name, but I kept walking down the stairs through the heavy doors, into November air that smelled like freedom. The drive back to the house felt different, lighter. The trees were nearly bare now, the landscape stripped down to essentials, honest in its nakedness. I pulled into my driveway, sat for a moment, looking at the house Linda and I had built. Protected now legally and irrevocably. Safe from schemes and manipulations and the particular kind of family love that came with price tags attached. Inside, everything was as I'd left it. Coffee cup in the sink, newspaper on the table, Linda's photograph smiling from the mantel. But it felt different. No longer a fortress under siege, but a home again. I called the Veterans Home director, told her the news. "We'll start planning the renovations whenever you're ready," she said. "Nothing changes for you, of course. This is your home for as long as you want it. I know. That's what makes it perfect." That evening I drove out to the lake. Linda and I used to come here in summer, sit on the dock and watch the sun set over water that turned from blue to gold to purple as the light changed. It was too cold now for sitting, but I walked to the water's edge anyway, stood where we used to stand. The lake was quiet, preparing for winter's freeze. A few late birds called from the trees. The sun was dropping toward the horizon, painting the sky in colors Linda used to try to capture in her watercolors, but never quite got right. "We won," I said aloud to her, to the water, to the November evening. "The house is safe. Your dream lives on." A breeze came across the lake carrying the scent of coming snow. The swing at my house would be moving now, pushed by that same wind, keeping rhythm with a life that continued even in loss. I thought about Ethan, about the boy he'd been, and the man he'd become, about the chasm that had opened between us, maybe irreparable, maybe not. Time would tell. Some wounds healed, others left scars that served as reminders. But I'd done what I had to do, protected what mattered, honored Linda's memory, stood my ground. The sun touched the horizon, and the lake turned to fire, gold and orange and red, like the world was burning and being reborn simultaneously. Linda had always loved this moment, called it the magic hour, when everything transformed from day to night, ordinary to extraordinary. I stood until the last light faded, until the lake returned to darkness, and stars began to appear overhead, the same stars Linda and I had watched from this exact spot hundreds of times. Then I returned to my truck, to my house, to my life. Tomorrow, the veterans' home would begin planning their renovations, turning bedrooms into counseling spaces, the garage into a workshop for therapy, the gardens Linda had loved into healing grounds for men and women who'd served their country. But tonight was mine, a quiet evening in a house that was finally completely irrevocably safe. I made dinner, scrambled eggs toast, simple and sufficient. Ate at the table where Linda used to sit, where Ethan used to do homework, where life had happened in all its messy, beautiful, complicated glory. After washing the dishes, I sat in my chair, picked up the book I'd been meaning to read, and listened to the house breathe around me. The familiar creaks, the settling sounds, the whisper of wind against windows. Somewhere in the darkness, the swing moved on its chains, keeping time with a rhythm only it knew. I opened my book, found my place, and read. By lamplight, while November pressed against the windows and the world outside prepared for sleep, the legal battle was over. The house was protected. And I was exactly where I belonged in the home Linda and I had built, living the life we'd planned, honoring promises that death couldn't break. Some fights were worth fighting. Some ground was worth defending. Some silences were more honest than any words. I read until my eyes grew heavy, then climbed the stairs to bed, past the gallery wall of family photographs that told a story I could no longer change, only remember. In the bedroom, Linda's things still waited, perfume bottles catching moonlight, reading glasses marking her place in the last book. She'd read the romance novel with its bookmark, forever, holding a moment in time. I lay down in the darkness, pulled up the quilt she'd made, and let sleep find me in the house that was finally, peacefully, completely mine. The swing outside continued its rhythm. The stars wheeled overhead, and in the quiet heart of November, an old man slept the sleep of the victorious, the weary, the free. Write one word that describes your feelings after watching this video.